I'd like to call to order the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly Special Meeting for Thursday, June 8th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. We are in the Assembly Chambers, and this meeting was called by the Mayor and the Assembly. Roll call, please.
Mr. Delgado. Mr. Griffin. Mr. Ledoux.
Here.
Mr. Sharrett.
Here.
Mr. Smiley.
Here.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Turner.
Here.
Mayor Arndt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, quorum is established. Next item we have is citizens' comments. We've got the budget coming up after citizens' comments, so if you've got some comments you'd like to make on the budget, there'll be a public hearing after citizens' comments. There'll be two public hearings. One is for the levying the property tax, and one is for passing the expenditure side of it. So at this time, it's citizens' comments, and the phone number, local phone number is 907-486-3231. The toll-free number is 1-855-492-9202. And ask you to, if you're present, sign in, state your name for the record, turn on the microphone before speaking. Please address all remarks to the Assembly as a body and not to any member thereof. If calling in, turn off any listening devices to prevent feedback. So, are there any citizens' comments?
My name is Dan Rohr. I'm here to talk about the budget. I'll speak about that later. Mayor Arndt and Assembly, thank you for being here. I know we're not supposed to call out one specific individual, but I did want to say welcome to Mr. Sharrett, and I wasn't here for when you got sworn in. So anyways, congratulations on the job.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments, citizens' comments at this time? No call-ins, so we'll move on to the consideration of matters in the call for the special meeting. With no objection from the Assembly.
Okay. I found this on the web for ration of matters in the car for the special meeting. Check it out.
Okay, let me repeat that. With no objection from the Assembly, staff requested that we process ordinance number FY 2024-2 before ordinance number FY 2024-1. So at this time, with no objections, we'll move to the ordinance number FY 2024-2, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 and appropriating from all borough funds.
Move to adopt ordinance number FY 2024-02.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Staff report, please, Amy.
Evening. I'm not quite sure which version you have in your packet. However, version 2 of the manager's budget, which is level 2, had some changes due to staff and benefit calculations, and included a left out position for maintenance position in the EF budget. That's why that one increased more than the others. And then I also provided a level 3, which
On yellow.
okay, on your yellow paper, that encompasses the changes that I understand Mr. Turner had requested. Change to the borough management department for allocated salaries from the landfill, and then the removal of $28,000 from economic development. And that's all I had.
Okay, any questions of staff at this time? We can raise questions later. James, go ahead.
Over the last couple of meetings, there has been mention of a resource management position, but that's not in here yet. So if we decide to pass this and add a resource manager, then we would have to take it out of
That
Where?
position would be, traditionally, that position has been funded out of the land sale account, which is 210.
Right.
And so if you decided at a later date to do that, that could always be handled through a budget amendment to that
Oh.
fund.
Okay, I just wanted to, that's where I thought it came from, but I just wanted to clarify, at least for the rest of the assembly and myself. I appreciate it.
Larry?
Is there money in the, thank you. Is there money in that account right now?
Yes?
Yes.
So what I heard you say is if we wanted to fund that position, the money is there right now at a later date.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, at this time, I would like to recess the regular meeting and open the public hearing. And once again, the phone numbers are, the local phone number is 907-486-3231. Toll-free number is 1-855-492-9202. And I ask that sign in and state your name for the record, turn on the microphone before speaking, address all remarks to the assembly as a body and not to any member thereof. If calling in, turn off any listening devices to prevent feedback on there. So at this time, anybody wish to speak on the budget, please come forward at this time.
Hello, Mayor and Assembly. My name's Dan Rohr. It's a little hard to know exactly which one I want to speak to in regards to 2 and 1 because some of it overlaps, so I'll try to be careful on that. My main concern is, as a community member who has numerous tax bills for commercial buildings and residential buildings, we hear lots of complaints about how much people are having to pay in taxes. As I've talked to people, I think the majority of people are less concerned about what they're actually being tax assessed for, and more what they're really concerned about is the mill rate. And so I realize our mill rates in Alaska, generally speaking, are pretty low, but like, let's say Pennsylvania, for example, which I'm very familiar with, their mandate by the state and by their local counties is only to be at about 60% of market value, versus in the state of Alaska, the expectation is to be as close to 100% of market value as possible. So where my concern lies is that we as a community have seen a massive, massive increase in residential home values, or at least the price they're selling for, over the last year, but really over the last couple of years. And so what that translates into is significantly more revenue to the Kodiak Island Borough. And although I understand, obviously, just like all of us, Kodiak Island Borough's costs are going up slightly, the reality is most of the Kodiak Island Borough's, your labor force is unionized, therefore, you know what that cost is. That cost structure is pretty fixed. I realize you're going to have to renegotiate at some point, but for right now. And so as I look at things, I'm concerned about the amount of extra money that's coming out of our community going to the borough. And what I'm mostly concerned about is money that's being set aside to effectively sit in borough savings accounts. So that concerns me a lot, because inflation is making that money less and less valuable every year that you sit on it. So, for example, and in construction, it's absolutely horrendous. So when you look at putting money in R&R, for example, which I'm a huge fan of, and when I sat up there, pushed hard to have money set aside in R&R, the problem is there's not contractors, there's not materials, and there frankly is not staff bandwidth to accomplish much more than what you've already taken on with the federal money you're spending on the roof at Peterson, the work you plan to do at Providence, the work you're already doing and continue to do at the landfill. Those all come out of non-R&R fund monies. Those are coming out of other special sources or special funds. So my concern is not lowering the mill rate this year when you've had a huge increase in revenue, and the message that sends to our community. I personally would have liked to have seen us close to a mill in reduction, but as I look at the numbers, I'm not sure that's super practical with what you've committed to giving the Kodiak Island Borough School District. But it does seem like a recognition of a $0.5 decrease would be fully possible, and I realize that reduces how much you could fund to R&R. But frankly, you're not going to be able to spend the money, I don't think, this year anyways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else wishing to speak under citizens' comments, please do at this time. No calls, No one else wishing to come forward. I will go ahead and close the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting. Assembly discussion.
Mr. Mayor, before we proceed, is level 2 on the floor right now, or?
Level,
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
James.
So I like the level 3 budget. I do have concerns over what we're gonna get reimbursed for bond debt. I too would like to lower the mill rate by 0.5 at least this year. But it's gonna be, for me to do that, it's gonna be determined on what everybody here thinks is going to be reimbursed on the school bond debt. And when you look at this, level 3 or the level 2, it is 100%. And so do we roll the dice again? Or do we plan on 50%? And there's not gonna be a whole lot of discussion about it because there's only 4 of us here, so it's gonna be hard to figure out which way we wanna go. But my wish would be to go to a level 3, and then have a discussion of lowering the mill rate a little bit.
Scott, then Larry.
I'm in favor of level 3. I don't trust the state government one little bit about paying back for the debt service at all. I think we have to cover it ourselves.
Larry.
The full debt reimbursement was in the governor's budget, which is a little different. And the fiscal package put out by the state did not spend everything in savings as they could have done. I would rather go with level 3 and cut the mill rate by a half and gamble on what the state's going to do. If they don't, then we're going to have to respond to it.
Ryan.
Well, you'll have to bear with me because the last few nights, I felt like I was in a master's degree program again, so I've been cramming. So I am also in favor of the level 3. I am inclined to agree with Mr. Turner on a $500,000 reduction. I do have a question. Are mills only measured in the half and full? Because my calculations yielded we could actually do a 0.75. So,
May I?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, you can do it any way you want.
Yeah.
You can do it down to the 1,000th.
okay. So, with that being said, may I continue?
Go ahead.
So, with that being said, I am in favor of the level 3 proposal that's here in front of us. And I would urge us to have our own calculations between 0.5 and 0.75, but I am in support of a mill reduction as well. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
So then I would propose inserting level 3 in the place of level 2 manager's budget, and then we're gonna have to discuss a little bit on,
So what you're doing is
Second.
moving to amend
yes,
by
so,
substitution of the level 3 for the level 2.
correct.
And it's
Second.
been seconded. I just need to get it clarified on there. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion, James.
So, I sent out to the clerk a 10.25 level mill rate to everybody. It doesn't change the manager's budget as far as each of the departments themselves in this. What it does do is it changes what we're putting into R&R and what we're putting into, yeah, it only changes R&R.
Right, for the
And
current
so-
year.
And so, yes, so basically, if you are looking, which most of you may or may not have it in front of you, but if we go with a 100% debt service reimbursement, then it balances out, and you just have a lower R&R. But if we go to a 50 or a 0, then we're starting to pull out a fund balance. And so, to me, I'd take the gamble and go 100% reimbursement, but I've already heard one saying that they don't trust, and I don't either. But my proposal would be to lower the mill rate, and I'm not doing the amendment yet, but lower the mill rate on level 3 to a 10.25, and let me get down to it here. There's a lot of pages. Gotta scroll.
James, while you're doing that, right now, we've got the amendment on the floor by substitution for level 3 over level 2.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind taking a vote on that and clean that up
Okay.
before we move forward. If you don't mind, it just keeps it simpler on there. So roll call vote on the amendment, please.
Okay, this is to substitute level 2 to level 3. Mr. Ledoux,
Yes.
Mr. Sharrett,
Yes.
Mr. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Turner.
Yes.
Would anyone like to change their vote? Motion passes, 4 yes, 0 no's.
Okay. James, before I call on you here again to continue, I'd like to interject a little bit about what my feeling is. We got our reimbursement, which was $12.3 million for the debt service that we were shorted by the Walker administration and the Dunleavy administration through vetoes. Now, we put money back in the R&R fund, money we had taken to make the debt payments. We put money into debt service. We also put close to $6 million in fund balance. And basically, we're looking at somewhere around $5.3 million a year in state reimbursement to get 100% reimbursement. So we've got a full year's 100% that we put into fund balance that's there to, I feel, cover us if it was 0. So if it's 50%, we're covered there. I also feel good in the sense that the state last year paid back the bond debt reimbursement. They paid off the oil tax credits. They no longer have any debt on the oil tax credits. So we're in much better shape, and the debt service is dropping by almost $10 million a year for the next 3 years because of the basically paying the debt off on the schools for the different boroughs, because there hasn't been no additional bond sales allowed for approximately the last 7 years. So I think you can, we're good with either 100%, or if we get less, we've got the money set aside to cover us there. So I throw that out that we're in good shape regardless what the governor does. So I was going to let James speak first, and then Larry, I'll let you. James, your turn.
So it would reduce the, I'm on the wrong page again, sorry. It would reduce the piece going into R&R, and of course I can't find that page, from $2,501,864 to $929,545.17.
Which page are you on?
It is in the yellow packet, and
Right.
it is the last sheet of the yellow packet.
Thank you.
Giving you a 2,501,000 in the or
I see in the red box.
red box.
Thank you. So everybody can follow. Which is the equivalent of 1.57 mils on there. So, do you wish to make an amendment at this time?
Not
Just
until further
discussion.
discussion.
Okay. Larry?
Just wanted to ask if we cut the mill rate by, instead of .5 to .75, how much what effect would that have? And Dora, as you sit out there, I hope that if we say anything or make any wrong assumptions, you'll start waving your
Raising your
hand or
hand.
something.
That'll take me a few minutes, so if you guys want to discuss further, then I can get you that.
That number. Yes, you may, Amy. Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Arndt. So just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Citizens' comments reflected that our employment costs are fixed. They are not. We are in a 21-3 failure of our union contract based around compensation right now. So that is not a fixed cost right now. So I just want to throw that out there, that we are in the middle of union negotiations, and so that's not a fixed cost at this point quite yet. And then I also wanted to say that, you know, it looks like we do have a lot of money, and those numbers that Mr. Arndt read are strong. But we also just took on another $4.7 million to add to our old loan, so we're over $6 million for the landfill. So we're still accumulating loans and taking on debt. We're not that flush that we're just able to break even here. So as we take on debt and we fund the schools at 95%, that's limiting our other options, what we can do with our money. So while the mill rate and MAPTR, I'm going to let Dora worry about all of those calculations. And once we set that up, we're going to need a recess in order to set up that next ordinance
go.
to be correct,
Correct.
to make sure that we're still in that MAPTR range. But I've just some of the assumptions that we're making aren't necessarily true. And while I agree that all signs look good right now towards the governor approving that, if they don't, and we drop down to take 7.5 or 0.75 off of that mill rate, and then we need to go back and find that money, and then we have some windstorm that blows the roof off of Maine or whatever, or east more likely, right?
Insurance.
Yes, but we're tying our hands, and we're not giving ourselves a lot of options for the future either. And we have a lot of big projects coming at the hospital and the schools. Once we do that, we are putting a lot of faith in the governor's pen. And so that has me concerned. And I would feel bad if I didn't say that.
Thank you, Amy. Larry?
I appreciate that, and that's why I wanted to take a look at the .75 to see exactly what it would mean and what impact it would have on the budget, because I think the public wants to know that kind of thing. So, thank you. I appreciate your comments.
James, do you have that calculated .75, what that equals?
No, not yet.
Okay. Scott, please.
As I recall, when we talked about boosting the school budget up to whatever it was, 205, there was concern that we weren't going to have enough money for contingencies. And I worry about cutting the mill rate because it's so hard to raise it afterwards. And I think we're headed for some big contingencies in the future. I'm not at all sure about the state and the viability of their way of dealing with what used to be called the fiscal crisis at the state level. It doesn't seem like anybody's done anything about that, leaving local government the only one that has to pay the piper each year and balance the books. By cutting the mill rate by $0.5 mil, I think we're going to have a hole, and we will not be able to catch up with unfortunate contingencies that will eventually occur. I don't know whether they'll occur in the next year or so. I'm not a prognosticator, but they will come sooner or later. there will be somebody driving a car in through a front door of a school, or something horrible will happen. And we need to have the capacity to take care of that in the future. In addition to that, Ms. Williams brought up the issue of employee costs. We have commissioned a company to give us a salary survey for the various situations. My son is in IT, and he's pulling down more than 6 figures now, and we're just not competent to do that with IT personnel here. We're going to have some retirements in that area in the near future, and it's going to cost us a pant leg. And I just worry about cutting budgets at this point, given how hard it is to bring them back up later in the future. Thank you.
Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, although I will agree with some of Mr. Smiley's comments, I actually feel that the recruiting or the staffing problem actually boils down to a holistic image of what Kodiak really is. And Kodiak is an expensive place to live. We have economic inflation. We've got adjustment values that are coming through. Our CPIs are climbing. Consumer sentiment is falling. Some could argue the onset of hyperinflation even. However, the speculation is not our job. Our job is to look at the numbers that are in front of us, and the numbers as I read them and as I interpret them, we can make a mill reduction. We have the ability to hedge our what ifs through our insurance program. If somebody drives through a door of a facility, we pay hefty, or we have the ability for that insurance. So I would still urge the Assembly to consider a reduction in mill rate. If my .75 was audacious, I would absolutely rescind that to Mr. Turner's .5. He's feverishly working on a calculator, and I'm trying to stall for you, Mr. Turner. So, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll add a little bit to give them a little bit more time. Basically, the increase in assessments this year at the 10.75 generates additional revenue to the Kodiak Island Borough, if you leave the mill rate alone, $819,000 new money, which is the equivalent of 0.57 mills. So by using half a mill, you still were gaining 0.07 on there. So the half mill gives us the money. And in addition to the money that I spoke to that we've put back into R&R and we've put back into debt service and we've put into the general fund balance, we also have a reserve built into the fund balance that is in addition to the approximately 5.5 that we put in there. So we are in good enough shape, without a doubt, to reduce the mill rate this year, 0.5 mills. The other thing I'll say is, from capital projects and attending the school board special meeting they had on Monday and a special meeting they had on Tuesday, on June 19th, their regular meeting, they're looking at moving $1.2 million into larger capital projects, approximately $75,000 into small projects so they can get started on them this summer. So it's not like between us we're not putting money into maintenance on things. And that's just the 1.2 is just from basically 2022's fund balance on there, because they don't know where they're at right now. So, and they're looking good if the governor signs off on the $3.5 million increase to basically the BSA, which is based on a one-time money, but it's still based on the BSA on there. And the legislature, in talking to them, is hoping to rectify that next year to make that permanent and possibly even increasing it to the $1,000. So I realize that there's some variables, but I'll be honest with you, it's the best I've seen in the 5 years I've been on the assembly here, going on 5 years. Larry?
I think your analysis that you gave a few minutes ago, including the one you just did, is very persuasive. I think, looking at the school district, they built their budget initially after making a number of cuts internally before they presented the budget on a zero increase of revenue from the state of Alaska. And as I understand the current bill passed by the legislature, they tend to increase one-time funding over $3 million, $3.5 million. Which puts them, and they also have a substantial fund balance that they indicated during the budget process in this room that they could handle a bad next year, if you will. And the legislature and the governor, who also recommended an increase in the BSA, have been very supportive of what's going to happen next year because, frankly, if they do not fund the one-time increase next year, they are going to create a cliff in the state of Alaska that is going to shut down most schools, or at least the big schools in the state.
And it's an election year.
Yeah. So I feel comfortable there, and I really appreciate the school district, using funds to take care of their buildings when the borough hasn't. And they certainly spent millions doing that, and that's a good partnership, and I appreciate what they've done there and continue to do. But I would also say that it's much easier to raise the mill rate than to lower it, by the very discussions that we've had. The mill rate has always grown. It has never decreased, or very rarely, and for the reasons that we give. If we were going to lower it, this is the time to do it. Next year, if we have to raise it for salaries or other areas, we certainly can do that. And but I think it's time to take advantage of what we had. I do believe it's going to have to go up in the future at some point. The, state funding, there's a lot of things on the horizon, but I think it's the best we can do because people are hurting with inflation right now in our community. Anything that we could do to support that, we need to do and take the risk. And it's not much of a risk.
Thank you. James? Your turn.
I show a shortfall of about $400,000, just over $400,000 in my calculations, if we go all the way down to 10 mil.
Right, but if we go to 10 and a quarter?
If we're to 10 and a quarter, we're fine. But I would have to confer with Dora to see what she says, but I'm showing a shortfall at 10 mil.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if I will, or if I can, I don't have anything different other than the general fund revenue is a little bit higher than, in my calculation, than what we have here on level 3.
Yeah.
But that just could be my math, and that's why I would say Dora should chime in.
Okay. So like I said, and we can take a recess here in a bit, but like I said, the increase is in the take for the borough this year, this coming fiscal year over the current year, is roughly $819,000. So, which is the equivalent of 0.57. So that's how I came up with 0.5 mils on there, and it works. So, with concurrence from the assembly, we'll take a 7-minute. Yes?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to ask Dora to calculate MAPTR into an Excel spreadsheet.
No, not the MAPTR yet. James was just asking for concurrence on whether she saw anything with half mil
Well,
versus the
we're
three-quarter.
still going to need to go to a program and figure it out. So I'd just like to give her a
Okay.
little more time than that.
Okay, what's the wishes? Dora?
So I'll need at least 10 minutes. 15 would be good.
Okay.
But I need to know what your parameters are. Do you want me to build it at a 0.5 reduction and take that out of R&R?
Well, I'm saying that we're good at 0.5. I do not believe that we're good at 0.75. And so.
I think you're
for-
right.
For me, I would rather not push it to go 0.75, so I would just ask that if somebody else on the assembly says 0.75, then we probably
Need more time.
we're gonna need a lot more time if we're gonna ask her to do both.
At 0.5, we don't really need her to go into it. This is what I'm hearing
No.
at this time. It's only at the 0.75. I would suggest a half a mil reduction, and somebody make a motion to that effect so that she has something that she can address. Ryan?
So my .75 was based off of a different KIBSD education support number that's listed here. So I'm sure your math is more accurate. This is not the number that I used. So if you're confident in your .5 balancing, then I would rescind my .75 and back your .5. Thank you.
So, we're not gonna discuss the mill rate at
At this
this
time.
point, so, then I would propose that I would ask that we, in discussion and vote on this to pass this.
No, you would have to amend, you would
Yeah.
have to amend to reduce the money into R&R.
Correct. And, well, and that's on the levy, but if you're going to preserve MAPTR, then you're going to have to do a transfer, more of a transfer from general fund to debt service.
Only if we're trying to preserve it. If we don't preserve it, we can lower the mill rate.
You can still lower the mill rate and preserve MAPTR.
Yeah, or not worry about it, too.
So we need a recess just to construct a motion.
Well, that deals with the next ordinance. So if you move to reduce half a mil out of R&R, that would take care of this ordinance. Correct, Dora?
Go ahead.
James.
So what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically we would want to put more into debt service and not into general fund, so that we are not taking that 200,000 out of general
Backwards.
fund.
My
Sorry.
preference would be is that you put more into transfer to debt service from general fund. Move,
Yes, sorry, I was stating
Yeah.
that incorrectly.
Okay.
Taking, lowering the mill rate into debt service and increasing the general fund. And the reason for that is because if we don't do that, then we're gonna be a lower MAPTR next year. Is that correct?
Correct,
correct.
And so we don't really wanna tie our hands
completely.
completely.
Okay?
So it'll take me a few minutes to work out those details.
Okay, how much time would you like, James, for your motion, for crafting your motion?
I would like it if Dora ran the numbers so that we had the finance director's approval and know
Okay.
that we're inside of that MAPTR. No offense to James, but if we're going to pass a manager's budget, I want the manager's staff. I don't care if you both do it, but I would like to come back and have an agree that what we're passing is legal.
Okay.
And
Well,
within-
that's what I was going to say as
Okay.
well. So I
Yay.
have no problem with that, and I think that we need.
How much
at
time
least-
would you like, Dora? 15 minutes. So we will come back at 7:30. Meeting is recessed until 7:30. Thank you. Mic's off.
it's just 10 acres, it's sort of the headquarters. Headquarters, so it's really old plantation house, not like a southern, but really old. And it's got a nice caretakers, place, that's where that's right there. A lot of buildings, great big, metal garage, where there's just avocados, it's really fun, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous. Then, we get back to Kodiak,
was like, so, she's like, so y'all get into Anchorage from Honolulu on October 24th. October 24th to go to Kodiak. She's like, so we might need a fix. So Renee's like, are we leaving Hawaii? I'm like, no, sir, we're going to the beaches. We're just gonna get into, yeah. So he fixed that. So I'm like, oh, good, they didn't know yet. But like, I get back Wednesday, so the only flights on that Wednesday are 1:30 or 2:30. So I'm like, well, I'll just take Thursday off. Yeah, you do. Just I was like, on Friday will be easy. Like, I'll just be I say easy. It's just gonna be like, let's come and get ready, get things caught up and ready for Monday. But I'm like, ooh.
We really don't do much with October until we keep track over how long the numbers. We don't really do much with like November, so October is one of the lower months for us. Why don't I take on this?
Well, no, I mean, I figure I'll log in and just check emails in the morning. Like, we're saying. I don't want to do it at night, so I'll be drinking. Right. But I can just get up in the morning. No. And like not do anything like right. But it was really good. We went to the movies. But it was great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also really stressed about it because we're staying in the same hotel. Oh, so we told you. Okay. Yeah. And Renee and I have said like, we want to have like 10 days or like 3 days. Like, you know, we want to do the family, like, I suggested one time, and I told my mom this for everybody was drinking. So, oh my God, you're so good. He's like, oh, we're like, these in Austin, like, go for the you guys go do your thing. He's like, no, I don't go there. He's like, go for the top of what she's like,
Right.
so, but I was like, let's just go do that, and then, she's like, will you get my interview already decided? And I was like, well, I don't need to get him any penny, because I won't be getting any penny for it. I'm like, you're missing the point here. Like, yeah, like, we're just, so, she's like, I said, like, maybe we can all, like, reconvene for dinner. And I'm like, yeah. Or don't just, also, you're getting, also, yeah, it just, so like little things like that, I just feel like they have to be like, my dad wants to one night do a trip around with all of us and like do dinner on the cabin. So, mom's like, like wanting to go on a trip, which is funny. Like that's how they approach this trip. They text me and Austin, because Austin and I'm like, oh, so 21 days. We get there at night, stand up and outside, see go to dinner, and then we're there next day. Like, she usually takes out 15 bucks with her, and about halfway through the trip, she'll yeah. Like they now make hardware reliable. I think it's all easy. I think it's all so it don't have she does not make content. She has no, but it was, yeah. Yeah, somebody else came up there for a while, I was like, are they guys? So I think that's what we did. I said, yeah, because we asked her, okay, what is, and it feels really nice to you. And I'm like, yeah, but she's like, she's like, you're gonna make your rooms, like, when she does, she shouldn't do anything. And then so then like the next day, my mom's like, no, we're gonna do it. She's like, so. Yeah, she's like, we use our balcony all the time. She's like, well, we use our balcony. I said, no, we're getting food, but we're trying to make it, you know, just to have some fun. And she's like, you are one, but I, you know, because she does that. She's like, so I told her, I was like, so, yeah, so but mom's like, which makes me feel like, oh, they don't use their room the whole time. She's like, I think it's no, because, well, so they would come down and we would go like up to Lynchburg, up to Jackson. So we would do, but it wasn't like, I mean, that was just before us. Now it's from the significant others. So, so on the flight down to Hawaii, we were on the same flight as Austin Machine, and we are AMC, so deep. And I'm like, I didn't like it, actually. I was like, when you're doing it 10 days, I hate it. I know, and that's what, yeah. So, I'm like, yeah, mom's like, let's just meet you at the hotel. Yeah. So. How many people are you in on that one?
No, it's just Kate and I, it's a point system. So we just, you know, we work a lot of things, which are really cool. And we, within, like, between 12 months, where we travel, 10 months, we get first days. So I'm not sure where we're playing at.
Right.
But our points go further, like if we go down to Arizona, like we go really far, where we go down to like Arkansas or something like that. So it was Diamond. It's actually pretty cool. We get into pass it on to our kids. And we go get maintenance.
Like here?
Yeah, so it's pretty. We actually turned into air business too, so there's, we're doing really well. Every year we're just moved there. I worked with the so we flew spring fashion. So that's kind of what we watch every year.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to announce evidently staff needs a little bit more time, so I'd like to give them another 10, 12 minutes, which will make it somewhere about 7:45. So just coming back on to let you know, we're still recessed, Larry. Thank you. Oh, is Dora on her way?
I have the first batch of information and yours coming for the next.
Okay. So we'll still be on recess while we get the information here. Thank you.
Thank you.
was struggling with MAPTAR.
After it
I know what it is, but, yeah, but I was like, and then I was like, oh, it's nice to have an abbreviation for the maximum allowable thing.
We were over with my sister-in-law, my nephew, niece, friends, and he was in Kodiak, who I didn't know. And, it was like, there ended up being. So we had 2 hours. Oh, yeah. So we're driving around.
I'm like, you know what, I will give you 9:45. Sure, we can make a reservation. So we sit down and I'm like, I know you're not serving. He's like mimosa. And I said, yeah. He's like, you see all those pieces of paper up there? I said, I do. He's like, those are mimosa. And I said, no, I understand there's some good last fine. I'm like, well, those were the people that thought they wanted brunch at 8 a.m. And she's like, I don't understand. She's like, weren't you up anyway? And I said, no, it was Saturday. What are you doing?
Hey, I have a contract in my truck at some point I need to have you. Okay, I will. No, I have to. It's like 2 or 3. I have it. I'll your truck on box. Because I'll probably leave before you're done. Open. I know, I was surprised. Yeah. said the main in Borough, but I said remote control. I can remote control.
Yeah, last night we were watching a show and I was like, honey, I gotta go see the car. And I'm probably gonna cycle class in the morning. And so he talked to me, I'm like, no, you can keep watching. I can't sleep with this movie on. But also when he watches it, I will sleep and he'll start rubbing my back. So I'm like, no, you can turn the TV on and I'm rolling over and he's like, yeah, he's like,
Hey Dora, did your husband see that his senior tax exemption cards? Somebody posted on Facebook. Did he see that? That he did. Okay, that it's available at the.
I'm sorry you weren't sitting here the last time that I came by with the last ordinance. Sorry, if you want to make things stretch out a little bit.
very much.
Okay, now everyone knows. So now we're back on. Yes. Okay. She can have these too. She what? She can have these. I gave her everything. Okay.
Are we, well, at this point, everybody's back in the room? So, yes,
So are we ready?
we are ready.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, we will reconvene the meeting. It is 7:42 PM. And at this time, call on James.
So now that we're on the main motion again, I'm going to make another amendment, and I know that irritates people, but I'm going to amend substituting level 3 with level 4 manager's budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. James, explain what that does, please.
So what that does is it it basically keeps our MAPTR the same formulation, calculation, but it also drops our mill rate by 0.5, making it a 10.25 mill rate. And then that brings the original facilities maintenance, or if you will, R&R, from 2,501,864 down to 1,706,246. And so that's where I'm at.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Had discussion here. Roll call vote on the amendment, please.
Mr. Sharrett,
Yes.
Mr. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Ledoux.
Yes.
Would anyone like to change their vote? Motion passes. 4 yes, 0 no.
Okay, we have basically ordinance number FY 2024-2 as amended to version 4 before us at this point. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the motion, please, as amended.
Okay, this is the main motion. Mr. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Ledoux,
Yes.
Mr. Sharrett.
Yes.
Would anyone like to change their vote? Motion passes. 4 yes, 0 no.
Okay. Now, we are done with that. So we'll go back now to ordinance number FY 2024-1, receiving the 2023 certified real and personal property tax roll, levying ad valorem property taxes for tax year 2023, consisting of an area-wide tax, Woman's Bay Area Fire Area Tax, a Woman's Bay Road Service Area Tax, a Bayview Drive Road Service Area Tax, a tax in Fire Protection Service Area Number 1, a Menasha Bay Road Service Area Tax, a tax in Service Area Number 1 for roads, a Woodland Acres Street Lighting Service Area, a tax in the Kodiak Island Borough Airport Fire Service Area, a tax in the Trinity Island Streetlight Service Area, a tax in the Mission Lake Tidegate Service Area, levying commercial aircraft tax, providing for the collection of taxes due in 2023, and setting the date when taxes become delinquent.
Move to adopt ordinance number FY 2024-01.
It's been moved and seconded. Okay, at this time, Amy, a staff report, please?
Dora is here, but she's just going to tell you that we've updated it from the level 3 to the level 4 to reflect the proper numbers in section 2. So you'll see that the mill rate now totals 10.25, and your changes in purple will be how we got to that 10.25.
Thank you. James, discussion or questions of staff?
I do not have questions. I just wanted to clarify that we discussed level 2 during the work session, so we're still talking 2 versus 4, not 3. So level 2 versus 4. So when anybody makes an amendment, we're going to have to go from
2 to
level
4.
2 to 4.
Correct. Okay. Do we wish to do that before we go to a public hearing? Go ahead, Dora.
I just wanted to comment, if you're comparing the total on the sheet that I gave you on the level 4 to this level 4, the total is a smidge different because the sheet calculates each component of the mill rate separately, whereas this takes it as a total. So there's like, I don't know.
There's rounding.
$1,000 or $2,000 difference when you're rounding millions of dollars, yeah. So I just, in case there's a comparison, I do know that, and it is factual.
The intent is to get it as close as possible. Thank you. What's the wishes of the assembly? Do we want to amend to version 4 before we go to a public hearing?
Yes.
I suggest that. So, Scott, you wish to?
Move to amend level 2 with level 4.
It's been moved and seconded. So, basically by substitution, we're substituting version 4 for version 2 on FY 2024-1. And at this time, I'll go ahead and close the regular meeting and open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to come forward and speak on this, please do it this time. The local phone number is 907-486-3231. Toll-free number is 1-855-492-9202. Anybody wishing to come forward? Thank you, Dan.
Mayor and Assembly, Dan Rohr again. Just briefly, during the previous discussion, there was discussion about the difficulty or the risk of lowering the borough tax rate. And I think it's something that we have to be careful in the way we word things, because we're actually, like your decision tonight, if you go to a 10.25, you're still increasing the tax burden on the Kodiak Island Borough residents. You're just not increasing it as much as if you'd left it at 10.75. So you're decreasing the mill rate, but the reality is for years, we've increased the tax revenue of the Kodiak Island Borough while keeping the mill rate level. So I don't know. I actually, when I sat up there, I felt like it was way harder to decrease the mill rate than to increase it. When you have to increase it, which we didn't have to do, but there's always a compelling crisis that causes that to have to happen. The only thing that I'm saddened by, and I did want to see the mill rate decrease. I don't love the fact that R&R always ends up being the scapegoat for borough expenditure solutions. And as somebody who owns buildings in town, and I set aside a lot of money to do R&R in my own buildings, I don't love that as a solution. But since you've already committed to a rate to the Kodiak Island Borough School District, there's just not enough other moving parts. When you look at the manager's actual operations budget for her side of the organization, I mean, that hasn't changed much over the years. And so anyways, I would encourage us as a community next year, we have to have a pretty significant conversation as a community about what does it look like long run wise at the levels that we support the Kodiak Island Borough School District. One other just quick comment. I realize that there's always risk with what is the governor going to do, what's the legislature going to do. The problem is it's super hard, if not basically impossible, to refund money to taxpayers. So you kind of don't have a choice. You have to make the decision, and if the governor does act something, then next year you have to make the hard decisions to increase things to cover those costs. But to what if it gets a little scary. So anyways, I think that's probably my time. We didn't start the clock, but I want to be cognizant of your time. So thank you. Again, I appreciate the direction you're headed with it. But again, next year I would sure like to see us not just use R&R as the solution all the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else wishing to come forward and speak at this time or call in, please do. And hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, reconvene the regular meeting. And this opens it to assembly discussion. The first thing I would say, we only had the one speaker, Mr. Dan Rohr, and I thank you for coming forward. And Dan, I agree with what you're saying in principle, but the truth of the matter is, for maintenance, we've dedicated the ARPA funds that we were allocated for school roof at Peterson, which is 2.6 million plus the design plus the inspection costs on there. So you're looking at $3 million on there. That didn't come out of R&R on there. Then we also took additional money out of there that's going out to the landfill as part of the second project was the leachate expansion project that ARPA money was dedicated to. So, that's between $4 and $5 million. That's outside of the R&R. It also, outside of the R&R, is money that we've gotten back from the school district. We've got $1.5 million, which is doing, we did some siding and roofing with that. We did the main elementary school roof replacement. We're looking at the R&R on North Star siding and windows. So I just throw this out for the public so that it isn't like we're not doing it. We're using a lot of additional funds on there, so it's saving this money in a sense on there. So that's why I feel comfortable in reducing it at this point. So, assembly discussion. Anybody wishing to speak to the motion as amended? Nope, as the amendment. James.
I appreciate Dora and Amy working on this so quickly. This is, as I've said, a great budget. I'm glad that we were able to pull a little bit out of that. I like the level 4.
Further discussion. Roll call vote on the amendment.
This is the roll call with the substitution from version 2 to version 4. Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Ledoux,
Yes.
Mr. Sharrett,
Yes.
Mr. Smiley.
Yes.
Would anyone like to change their vote? Motion passes, 4 yes, 0 no.
Okay, so we have the motion as amended before us. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the amended motion.
Mr. Ledoux,
Yes.
Mr. Sharrett,
Yes.
Mr. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, Mr. Turner.
Yes.
Would anyone like to change their vote? Motion passes, 4 yes, 0 no.
Okay. Pardon me? Yes, we did. So, next item is adjournment. Motion, please. Scott?
Move to adjourn.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Say aye, please. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:55.
That's the good news.
We'll take a 5-minute break here before we get into the work session packet. Thank you.
A little different perspective sitting up here.
Wanted to state how much we were dollars wise we were lowering that. I'm sorry.
I didn't see your hand.
Because you didn't look this way.
I did earlier, but was it not?
Also, you cannot, even as mayor, direct your answers to public comments.
Yes, I do.
You may say, in an answer to a question posed during public comments, then you can say, but you can't say, Dan, I appreciate that.
There was only one person that got
Doesn't
that.
matter, you still can't do it.
I noted that too, but I didn't want to,
I was clicking my pen over here.
I know, I
I
heard
made
it.
an example, earlier I was like, it came up in public comment, right?
Yeah.
I modeled the behavior.
I know, but he
What are you
didn't
gonna
follow.
I'm just wondering what time the pizza shows up.
Somebody has to order it.
I was like, is that an option? I'll order it right now, and they deliver to the back door.
Yeah. On there. Thank you, Amy.
I mean, I'm gonna say this in my manager's report, but truth be told, all I did down there was go to the refrigerator and get a new tire, Dr. Pepper, hand it to her when she needed a refill. That's all Laura. I was able to be like, nope, that's not right, nope, that's not right, nope, that's not right, so I was super helpful. No, it wasn't. It's hard to work when you, like, the clock is like.
Mhm.
Would you like me to crack the door? No.
No.
4 years. 4 years.
So what?
I've been trying to lower the mill rate for 4 years.
All you needed was me on here.
This is
Jeez.
the 5th year, yes.
You're welcome.
You know, it took me twice to, I never did get appointed. I actually had to run, but I got denied twice when I tried for appointment.
Well,
So you and I are
Alike.
pretty close.
yeah. Although you have more access to fish than I do.
And I didn't threaten to sue.
Were you served?
No.
You know, I do have these really fancy dancy papers here.
Yeah. Papers are nice. How much time do I have? 5 minutes?
3 now.
but
But for smoking?
Thank you, Eric. for your support.
yeah, well. I know where the money is for a resource position now, so.
It's been there, but one of the things to be careful of, that's also the money to build the road and pay for surveys and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Like I said, but I
There's
also
things we
like
can
to
do.
have a meeting with like some developers. We just sit down and talk about what we can do to get some developers in there to really develop something like Berkeley used to do.
Well, the nearest one to that right now is Kodiak area natives.
No, but we'll
63
put you all
miles.
those official level 4
Yeah, this was
updates
good.
for your records.
Where are we with Swampy? I know they're trying to get federal funds.
Oh, they've been trying to do that for
Swampy?
years.
No, which side?
Where the movie theater used to be during World War II.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Where's that?
I don't remember that.
What
Right
was it
across-
like in World War II?
Right across from the guard tower.
What was it like during World War II? Sorry.
In Fairbanks, at the Rasmussen Library.
He wasn't here either.
I know.
At the-
No, but just the youthful question that just came across. If you don't laugh at that, then something's wrong.
What was it like when Baskin Robbins only had 2 flavors?
I missed that whole thing.
So, you know, Natives of
guard
Kodiak was
to the-
nice enough to sublist out Swampy Acres to me. So now I have an outdoor.
But you're on the other
recreation.
side, aren't you?
I'm on the
Ocean.
west side. Nope, I'm on the west side.
That buzzer likes me.
Well, it doesn't sound like they're going to get their sewer system.
Would you hand me a tissue? Thank you.
When I was a kid, the guard to the base used to be right around Dead Man's Creek. On the, on the base side. Guard tower right in the middle of the road. They tore it down.
Well, that's probably about where my property lease begins.
The movie theater
Okay, we'll go ahead and
used to be
call the meeting back to order.
inside now.
We're now starting the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly work session packet here. So for Thursday, June 8th, which was immediately following the Assembly meeting, and it is 8:01 p.m. on June 8th here. So first item we have is citizens' comments. And once again, the local number is 907-486-3231, and toll-free number is 1-855-492-9202. Anybody wishing to call in or come forward to the podium, please do at this time. Seeing no one coming forward and hearing no phone calls, we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda items. And this first one is update and discussion on the following engineering and facility department projects. Water Technology Incorporated report, Kodiak High School pool evaluation, CRW memo, Kodiak School water treatment alternatives, Kodiak Middle School elevator evaluation report, and PKIMC, which basically is the Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center, basically our hospital elevator evaluation report. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Conrad is here to talk about all of his items disguised into one. And we'll just go in order, right, Dave?
Whatever the pleasure. Basically, I'm here to answer questions and get direction. These projects you're well aware of. They've been ongoing for quite some time. And the question is what direction do you want to go? Starting with water technology, WTI for the pool evaluation. I believe the phased approach that's recommended in this report is the actual way we should go about this. I also want to say let's cut down the report for the public and say that the pool is not falling. It is still repairable. It is salvageable. We just need to, as a community and as the responsible parties for it, realize that we can't let it go for years at a time without doing larger maintenance sessions on the pool, which at times may mean that the pool needs to be closed for a period of time. It truly doesn't matter to me, and hopefully it doesn't matter to most of you, what the construction methods were at the time, what materials were used. This is all in the past. We need to look at fixing what is wrong with the pool, trying to preserve it, and there may be things that were done on the original construction that we choose not to fix, and we may need to tolerate. So, for instance, decks not draining properly. That's extensive repair work. I think we need to do the immediate repairs to the pool. The company that we used for the evaluation has relationships with a firm that specializes and does lots of pools in the state of Alaska. We could look at contacting them because they're familiar with and go out to bid that way. We can have this company also come back and help us develop a proper RFP so we could have multiple bidders on this process. But that's direction you need to give my department and the manager to move forward. So I'm going to stop on the pool and see if there's any conversation on the pool.
Larry?
and I apologize if I haven't read this, but what exactly are they proposing they do to the pool to do immediate repairs for?
Well, the immediate repair is to take care of any of the spots that have the rust, which means you have to remove tile, you need to go in, go back to where the rusted material is, treat and/or replace the rebar that is causing that rust from the penetration of the water. Effectively, there is no waterproof membrane on the exterior surface or under the tile of the pool. So consequently, through cracks, lack of waterproofing, whatever it is, not repairing grout on a normal basis, a normal regular schedule, possibly using incorrect materials for repairs, those items need to be taken care of first. The piping can be replaced. The piping likely should have never been done with cast iron. It should have been a plastic pipe that wouldn't have degraded. It may have collected material on the interior to some degree, but with the flow of the water properly, it shouldn't have been. The filtration systems need to be looked at. And if you go over and look at it, which I know you likely have, there's been RTV repairs and things like that done on filtration. There are...
For the public, RTV.
It's a heavy-duty caulking, a sealant.
Okay, thank you.
All right? There are gauges that are read by the folks who do the pool that read flows that are too close to elbows, so consequently, those flows can go through this huge variation. And if you're trying to calibrate the amount of chemical that you're putting in by a flow rate that moves constantly, you're not able to actually put the right amount of chemical in there. So some days you'll hear that, oh, it's, there's a lot of chlorine or it's, whatever, salt from sodium hypochlorite, but still, you can't adjust it. The more neutral, the more level you can have your chemicals within your pool, you're not taking chemicals out of your grouts, out of your thin set, anything that holds that on. So those are the things we need to look at first.
Continue.
Go ahead, Larry.
So there are just a number of really separate issues to the pool. It's not just one issue like this, the discoloration, it's others. I guess the original, like 7 years ago, perhaps, the district paid $48,000 to address the first flow through, and a local contractor, drilled it down to the rebar and did what they were supposed to do, which I think you just described. My preference, given that it's multidimensional, but I would rather have it broken down so a local contractors can take a look at different components of it than instead of going out and having somebody from outside coming in. And you asked for that question, and that would be my preference, is to see if we have local interest or to have the consultant break it down so that what can be done locally by businesses can be done here instead of somebody coming in and fixing it that has really no accountability once they leave town. So
I understand what you're saying, and to some degree, I think that's a viable option. However, consideration needs to be made that there are companies that specialize in treating and correcting problems with pools. And I think if you don't look at that aspect, you're cheating yourself and the public.
I absolutely agree with you. That's why I really believe a consultant, a professional say, here's what needs to be done, and they spec it out. And then a contractor that's a plumber, once they know what to do, might be able to take care of it locally, is all I'm saying. I wouldn't try to do it in-house because we're not pool experts and you've never claimed to be one.
Well, and my preference would be that the direction that was suggested is that we contact the WTI and let these guys help us develop a statement of work. So we have proper statement of works. They've already lined out in the document the various stages that this could be broken down into. This is what they do. They design pools for a living.
Page 20 and 21.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank you. First off, I want to just let you know that this is actually a very professional package, so I appreciate the efforts that you did on this. Couple things. I had emailed over a list of questions after reviewing this packet. I'm not sure if that was the best way to do it, or if I need to restate those questions here. And by no means are my questions to dictate means and methodologies, just to get a better understanding, because I'm also not a pool expert, nor do I play one on TV.
21.
I did see this project in three very succinct phases, and I wonder if some combination of breaking this project down into three phases would not only satisfy Mr. Ledoux's concern of local preference, but also minimize the impact to the community by taking the pool offline. I want to caveat that with, I actually fully support this project, and I think that this report is very professional. And I compliment your selection on your vendor and back your position to have the experts do this. I'll also let you know that it's very rewarding to hear you say the piping system perhaps should be like an HDPE or a plastic type product. That's extremely refreshing. Hopefully that during this project we can get those items spec'd into this. I do have one question that wasn't asked on my series of questions submitted. Has the borough staff validated the price ranges that are illustrated on page 20 and 21?
We have not, because we're not pool experts either.
Roger.
You know, we can verify equipment cost and things of that nature, but they're also estimating labors and things of that nature that unless we're going to go to where we're full-time estimators and going through RS means, then that's not what we do. And I also think it would be a disservice if we try.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going for, is if they are using an estimating program like an RS means that does not capture the economic disparity that happens here in Kodiak, as I'm sure you're well aware of, and that would lead to significant project overruns.
So these guys have done multiple pools. They're familiar with rural Alaska. I had extensive conversations about sitting in Bethel waiting for tile. So this is not their first rodeo in Alaska. That's why I am so comfortable with WTI. This is what they do. The gentleman that was here was stuck for 4 days due to weather. He has looked at the pool more than anyone in this room has ever been in the pool the whole time they've lived here. He was there literally 3-4 days in a row, 6-7 hours a day.
Perfect. Well, through proxy, you absolutely have my support on this, and I am not in the position to dictate means and methods, so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to discuss that? I'll go ahead and throw out a couple things, and I guess part of this is for the public's information too. The first priority on recommendation of the pool vessel concrete repair. The way I'm reading this is we remove all the tile and grout on the entire interior of the pool vessel itself, and all of the concrete is demolished. It says the pool vessel concrete should be demolished and replaced.
That's the areas that are showing the signs of degradation, not the entire surface.
Okay, that's not clear here, because all corroded rebar is exposed, and basically it says tile finish will need to be removed, and the concrete removed to expose the steel reinforcing. I'm seeing that as all.
Well, in the first sentence, it says in the areas with rust/corrosion. So I think that they're specifically referring to the places where we can
Okay,
see.
that's part of why I'm going here, is my concern is not just those areas where the corrosion is right now. There's other areas that will corrode later, just like, as Larry said, 7 years ago, we were in there and they did repairs. I don't want to go back in there again. So there's basically the technologies there to use X-ray to see what other areas there is not the cover on the reinforcement bar. Because I only want to go in and take this tile off because all the tile is coming off in order to match. We're putting new tile on the whole interior of that pool, is the way I read this on there.
I think eventually that would be the case, but I think if to do a phased approach here, you take care of the disease, and then you diagnose the best way to take care of the rest, whether that be remove all the tile, remove a section of the tile. If you remove all the tile and you treat the concrete, that pool is down for several months.
Correct.
Then we're back to the suggestion or the request by Mr. Sharrett that we look at an alternative arrangement for access to a pool here in town, which there's only one.
One other pool. There's two pools on the island.
There's one other pool. I'm
Okay.
fully aware. I've been dealt with both.
I understand. I'm just making it clear on there. In order to waterproof the whole pool, which is one of the issues brought up in here, all the tile needs to come off. And I think you're best to do that at one time.
I think we need to let the experts chime in and do the division because they're the ones who do pools for a living. Hence, let them help develop the statement of work. At that point, it would go to the ARB for review and comment. This is not going to be a once and deal done. I'm not going to answer, I don't have every answer for you here tonight.
I understand
I
that.
don't plan on it, but I'm simply trying to get a path forward because the longer we talk about it, the worse it's going to get.
Ryan?
So with that being said, then perhaps when they develop an RFP or an ITB, however you plan on procuring this, I would actually like to see an alternative item or an alt one with a rubber membrane, remove everything. Rubber membrane, and that solves a lot of complexities. I believe that would probably
Right.
negate the X-ray machine that you're asking about and give a very substantial life.
I believe that removal of all of the tile and all of the substrate that holds the tile on would give you access to any visual cracking, any other penetration, and then rather than putting a membrane-type sealant or membrane per se on it, you use a liquid membrane that is painted on like you do similar to a tile, but for an industrial application for a pool. I don't believe you want any film, so to speak. I believe you want something that you can put on multi-mils
And it
of this
penetrates.
product and also allows adhesion for your epoxy substrate and the proper epoxy grout to seal your tile.
Yes. Well, part of this is to get it out there for the public that isn't here. We get more people on there. So, anyway, those are some of the things. And then, in going to the school district meeting on Monday of this week, which was June 5th, there was discussion about they have a problem with the CO2 getting it, and that affects the pH balance, which if you don't keep it right, then it starts eating the grout out more. But one of the things that, hopefully we'll look at is a CO2 generator to generate that on site.
I believe that should be one of the options to consider.
So, further discussion. Ryan?
Yeah, you actually took the words right out of my mouth. So I was also in attendance at that school board meeting, and the maintenance director indicated the logistical complexities of CO2 to the island. So if we can solve the pH problem or create our own CO2, that could be a significant cost savings, realized gains fairly shortly. So thank you very much.
So the second item on this lengthy list is the discussion about the Kodiak school water treatment alternatives. There are several there. The problem with this discussion is that there's a difference between the amount of people required to keep a school open and the amount of people that the DEC looks at for the level of treatment and the requirement of testing based on the user amount at a specific facility. One of the items that Mr. Sherritt had brought up was, and this has been avoided in the past, is, if I read your questions and your statements correctly, was looking at the potential of a community well. That has always been frowned on. We currently could put this system in at $500,000 is what's estimated, and that would satisfy the amount of people that are utilizing the well on a normal day-to-day basis. If you put in a community well, you're now looking at having to have someone that has a water treatment certification, that's a certified sampler. You have to do regular performed, prescribed sampling. We are able to do some of the sampling required in town through the city. However, then you also have to do sampling that will likely need to be sent out, which is problematic at the least sometimes, last 2 weeks, trying to get samples to the lab in hold times and things of that nature. So the more complex the system, the larger the system, the more costly the system. That would also force someone to pay for that system for more than just the usage of the school district and the occupants of the school. But we could also buy a whole lot of water and send bottled water out there. I know I'm technically, associated with the Solid Waste Advisory Board, and I should be talking about recycling, but there's a cost component here. And I'm sorry, as a taxpayer, ship them out a couple of cases of water every day. That's another alternative that's not in that report.
Yeah. This is very expensive for the number of kids.
I have a phrase, but it wouldn't be appropriate, but yes, I concur.
Ryan?
So my comment is holistic. I know we're looking at this from a school approach, but my understanding was serving on the assembly was for the greater good of the Kodiak residents. So I apologize if I offended somebody about keeping this focused on the school. I would urge us to consider some of the Department of Homeland Security funds that are out there that provide emergency water filtration systems that can absolutely be utilized in a setting, and they are DEC approved. So I would encourage us to look there before we even consider bottled water or spending this type of money. But again, I will compliment the report. It is very thorough and accurate. So,
Dave?
So I will also comment that in the last multiple months since this has been developed and we've been testing on a regular basis, there's not one regulatory discrepancy on the water that we're producing right now with 2 UV filters as the treatment.
What's your recommendation?
I would like to talk to the CRW folks and see if I can explore what Mr. Sherritt just mentioned here, because it's not part of the report. I truly think that we need to focus on the school.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that if all of a sudden the population drops, you're still not supporting a facility. You have the ability to close a facility and close this down. If we get to where we're 26, 27, 28, we're in a totally different classification when it comes to the maintenance and upkeep of the system, because you're now allowing a larger user group, but it's a limited user group to the area.
Dave, do we have any idea how many kids might be bused out there that don't live in the district?
All I know that right now there's 24 that I'm aware of at the school as far as the folks using the water. I don't know. I think Larry just indicated 3.
I don't really know this year.
Yeah. I don't think it's many.
Okay, James?
So most of my questions are basically design, on number one, existing, versus the.
Which
treat-
page, James?
Treatment schematic. On mine, it's 28 and 29, but.
Thank you.
I'm probably 2 pages off from printed copies.
I got figures on 28 and 29.
Well, it says 8 of 8, and then you go into 2 schematics.
8 of 8, yes, got it. Thank you.
And so, basically, the filters that we see in the first, that's this schematic, correct? And then the chlorine pump, why would we put the chlorine pump at the end of the system instead of prior to the tanks? And the reason why I ask this is because if you look at the tanks that we have now, I'll try and, the slime on top is what I'm talking about. So if you're holding all of that in those tanks after UV, and it may not be now after putting in the UV, but to me, it would be better if that chlorine injector would be before the tanks, but that's just me. And then, the other part of that is, part of that line goes to the old library, and so you have no chlorine in that system. So, just a question. And then, instead of so if you compare the two systems, one is a reverse osmosis and one is a filter, and I'm gonna forget what kind of filter at this point, cartridge filter. Cartridge filter, relatively easy to replace and maintain. Reverse osmosis, not so easy to maintain if something breaks down. So I'm pretty against the reverse osmosis, because then you'd have to, number one, either find somebody that can deal with them, or have somebody come from off island to work on them. And then the other piece of that is the annual OM cost, or alternative to OM costs. You have labor, power, miscellaneous supply, major equipment, amateurization, and contingency for annual costs for each of these. What I don't see is vehicle repairs, fuel, that can add up going all the way out there.
Well, I believe this was prepared for a water system, but I do agree and understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the reason for the chlorine at the end is because you can do a lower dose at a lower contact time, and you're not worried about overdosing. What you want to do is try to do exactly what, opposite of what we're doing now. You do not want to store untreated volumes of water. You want to have it more point of use oriented, to where the pump runs when there's a demand, not the pump runs to fill a reservoir. You chlorinate it, then you chlorinate it again, and you hope that you have proper levels so that it gets to the end user.
Bottled water sounds easy. Amy?
It's weird for me to ask a question here, but are there really 13 students who take a 15-minute shower per day at the school?
Likely not.
Okay,
Other-
well, that's
they're-
just, that's
they're
like
the-
half of the water usage that we're reporting. That's 488 gallons of the, I just can't imagine that happening.
I
That's all.
don't, I've never monitored the shower out there either, so.
Okay. James?
So the other question I had is, instead of a cartridge filter or a reverse osmosis, why wouldn't we use a sand filter? A self-cleaning sand filter?
I'm not familiar enough with sand filter technology, other than that's what I'm familiar with from my experience with pools, we're talking drinking water here. So I would think that it also depends on what, I'm not sure that sand filters do the pathogen and bacterial removal that cartridge filters and carbon filters can do.
Thank you.
Ryan?
I can answer that. This is my wheelhouse. So, sand filters are sedimentary in turbidity, and in order to have a sand filtration system, you'd need to have inline carbon filtration, inline clay filtration, and then you'd have to have a fallout. So the complexity of a sand filtration system to meet drinking water quality standards would exceed the proposal that we actually have in front of us. They're very complex. So I would still, since I have the floor,
Yes, you do.
I still want to talk holistically. I know we're really focused on the school, so you're just going to have to bear with me, but we have residents that live in Kodiak, and there is only one road, and if something happens to that road and services go out, water is an essential element of life, and from a continuity or disaster preparedness standpoint, I don't know if I would support this if it weren't for a community basis. So, thank you.
Further discussion? Questions? James?
I don't think we gave direction.
No, we didn't. So I'm just wondering if anybody's got any more on there. I don't like the dollar amounts we're looking at here. And I think that there's other options. Part of the problem with the community concept is who's going to pay for it. And you have to look at, that's part of the reason service districts are formed on there. And so there's buy-in on there. Our concentration is for the school, which is our responsibility. Now, we don't have water power or sewer powers out there. Those need to be adopted by the residents before we have that authority on it. So Service District 1 was formed primarily for sewer and water, and roads was added. Now we've turned the sewer and water over to the city. So, but for the school there, that's what our main purpose is right now. Larry?
Thank you for exploring the complexity of an issue that just seems to hang around forever. I do agree with Ryan that if we're going to put that kind of money in, why not do it? And if it becomes a public system, which is, I think, the category they're requiring, then it becomes available to the community. And if we could do both for the same cost, I certainly want to do that, regardless of whether someone's a service district or not. It just makes good sense to do it. Also, Kodiak School has potential to grow. If the borough would sell some of our property out there, probably it would help it grow. We have a lot of property out at Kodiak area that's available. But in any case, I think we just need to put this to rest. Now, currently, though, we're legal. Is that correct? We're under 25.
Barely.
Barely, okay. I don't know, what is the district projecting for next year for Kodiak School?
She said 19 students.
19 is what I heard.
19 students plus staff. So you're still looking 24, 25 people.
Yeah, we're pretty close, I agree. I don't think I have enough information personally, in terms of the regulations to make a recommendation other than until we understand it. I agree we should just move water out there. If that's what we would do, if that's legal. Until we
Dave,
can do a permanent solution.
Dave and then Scott?
Well, I think I'm going to wait because I was about ready to surmise what direction was, but I think
Okay.
I'll wait until everyone
Thank
gets
you.
to weigh in.
Scott?
The reverse osmosis system, it seems to me to be just too pricey. So if we were going to go with something, I would suggest the cartridge filtration system. I don't know whether this is supposed to hook up to the tsunami building or not, is it? Without that connection, I don't see how we provide this to the citizenry then. And I think they would have to vote on it like Mr. Arndt suggests in terms of a service district tax to help pay for the price, because it's going to increase significantly if we go that size.
Ryan?
Just from personal experience, personal firsthand knowledge, I know there are Department of Homeland Security funds available for community water systems. If we tie this to a school, we would not become eligible. If we tie this to a community, the school would be a byproduct of receiving water. I would just urge us to explore those options. Grants.gov, community water, and I would just urge us, we could potentially have no money spent in this. There is no matching program for remote community water systems through the Department of Homeland Security. Thanks.
Thank you. Dave?
So what I'm hearing is I should go back to the consultant, have them expand their scope, look at potential for different systems, but also project the long-term maintenance and testing costs required for a one-time grant that'll simply pay for the system, but normally will not pay for ongoing maintenance and funding.
Operation and maintenance. Sounds good to me. What, the rest of you concur? Okay. Thank you, Dave. Next. Oh, James, did you have your? No. I didn't see you. Next, Dave.
So the next is the middle school elevator. And I'm going to put the PKIMC elevator in because the theme that I've been hearing from the assembly lately is see if we can't package things. So consequently, what my preference would be is you were provided reports by the same consultant who was an elevator inspector for the municipality of Anchorage for a number of years. I would suggest that we go ahead and actually get a hold of this gentleman and see if he would be willing to help us put an RFP together. I have a problem with doing repair contracts with existing contractors that are in place. I believe that to be somewhat self-serving, and I also believe that there's only 2 viable elevator firms in the state of Alaska that will look at providing us pricing on this.
Okay. James?
I know we're combining them at this point, but I'm going to ask about the middle school. The middle school is a single elevator, then the hospital is 2 that we're talking about.
That's correct. And then we also need to I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
They're the same size?
Negative.
No.
Well, the hospital ones are a little larger, correct?
Yeah.
The hospital elevators are larger.
Okay. So the repair cost that we see in the middle school is $141,000 and change, correct?
That's correct.
I know the theme has been repair. I'm against the repair. I would rather put in new in all 3 locations. And the reason why I say that is I was just quoted last year, and yes, last year is a different price, but the price was $155,000 and change for a new elevator, a new 8-foot by 12-foot wide elevator. And it was not a fancy elevator, but it was stainless interior with push buttons and all of that good stuff, just like the ones in the hospital. The only issue with the one that I got quoted on is number 1, it only goes 3 floors. So that may change the hospital ones just a tiny bit over, but it's too close for me to say, let's just repair, because I think that we can go, and I don't see any new elevator numbers in here, so that's why I'm going away from this theme, is I would rather go new, and I don't know what the rest of the assembly is.
Dave?
So I'd like to remind you that we're looking at starting a study for what does healthcare look like, what do our facilities look like. The repair at the hospital could be advantageous in that it will extend the life of the elevator for a 10-year period of time at a lower cost. If there is to be an addition placed on, then you would have brand-new elevators that could access all of the floors that you're dealing with, and it would be less impact on the current operation by taking a single elevator down at a time and replacing in the future. There could also be a cost savings with the fact that if you're, have a general contractor building a multi-story building, that it might behoove us to replace the elevators at the same time, just one at a time. So that's a consideration. There's no easy choice here.
Right, and I like personally the 10-year fix, so that basically, my line of thinking is ideally within 7 years we're building, and I'd like to see them replaced so the elevators are the same brand throughout the complex on there. And I agree with James on the middle school, we need a new elevator price because that elevator is 40 years old this year.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we did do some major service work during the
Before.
high school remodel, actually. I believe there was an elevator component in that as well.
On the high school,
Yes.
yes.
Well,
Ryan?
in the middle school, during the high
Oh.
school job is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Ryan?
I'd just like to point out that on this report and on this price, there are several limitations or exclusions: cab flooring, sprinklers, smoke detectors, electrical system, alarms, hoistways, phone lines, hydraulic jacks. As the things are excluded, I want my colleagues to understand that these prices are, this is a rough estimate by all means. I would only support the emergency or life-critical elements right now. A brake stopping system sounds pretty gosh darn important to me. That is one of those things that if you have a brake system failure and a fire extinguisher that's out of compliance, that's a life, health, and safety issue that needs to be resolved post haste. But the purpose of this is, again, when you exclude sprinkler systems and electrical systems, those costs, we can only throw a dart at a dartboard. So, go ahead.
Those costs have been excluded for the simple reason they're specialties. And so consequently, if you'd go out for a formal bid, they would have to contact a sprinkler company. They would have to make sure there was an electrician. Even when we do our normal maintenance on elevators, there are times that we need to ensure that an electrician is available. The brake system on a hydraulic elevator is not as critical as on a traction elevator. This is a hydraulic elevator.
Continue, Ryan?
Yeah, so I just want to, again, illustrate that if they're going to go out for a bid, this 141,000 and some change, 141,568 estimate that they've given is going to exponentially grow legs. So that is a strong consideration supporting Mr. Turner's position of, is this a cheaper fix or resolve to go new? I think that should lend a perspective as we analyze this, and I'm inclined to agree with your position as new and new as well. But I would still be remiss that until that comes to fruition, that those life safety items need to be fixed or the service needs to be taken offline.
Dave and then James. James?
I was just going to say that even in the new, you're going to have all those extras not included in the original bid. That's how the bid was for the elevator I got quoted. And that almost doubled once we got all the other quotes but we also used local bids on the majority of those items, except for the fire. So that they have a service tech here in town, but not always.
Dave?
So I have spoken with Jensen Yorba Wall, and they're more used to installing and speccing brand-new elevators. I believe that if we want to go down that brand-new elevator path, we have them spec that and do up a statement of work for bidding purposes for the 2 elevator companies that are going to bid this in the state, but also perhaps contact the professional elevator inspector, retired now, who gave us the evaluation as a quality control on our proposal. Putting it in the hands of a contractor, not as a maintenance item, but a brand new, automatically tasks them with having to bid all the peripheral items that Mr. Sherritt has requested or pointed out that have been excluded. They're responsible for the fire suppression system alterations and inspections, things
And
of
the
that nature.
coordination.
It will cost us a little more, it will take a little more time at the front end, and I understand it's probably really frustrating getting stuck in that elevator for a while. However, yeah, I think hopefully that's where you tell me to go.
Blissful or something. Ryan?
Yeah, I could fully support an inclusive bid that seeks subcontractors under the single umbrella rather than trying to manage a complex project with 3 to 5 different specialty contractors. I could absolutely get behind that. Thank you.
Any further, Larry?
Well, just in agreement with the replacement, it would seem that, as somebody already brought up, we could start ensuring that whatever we install is consistent with perhaps elevators that we have installed elsewhere. So we have the same kind of model, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because we're doing the smaller ones before we do the bigger ones at the hospital. So, Dave, do you feel you have some direction?
Well, I have a direction, and I'm happy to go forward with it. I believe we're looking at contacting our architect and looking at replacement costs for elevators. And while we're doing it, I've got an engineer coming here in a couple of weeks that I will have look at the hospital elevators as well.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that, with the elevators together, I look at that kind of concludes this report. So next item is packet review. And there's the proclamation declaring Filipino American Heritage Month in Kodiak. Then we have public hearings, resolution number FY 2024-2, reestablishing the fees of the Kodiak Island Borough. Staff report, Amy, through you.
Evening, again. Every year, reviewing the fees comes up in your June itinerary. These fees were dispensed to the directors for any changes. None came back except for mine. So what you'll see in there is a return fee for ACH payments. We have a return fee for checks. We do see an increase in people who have changed their banking information and not let us know. So when we do an ACH, it comes back, and then we have to contact them, and on and on and on. So I kind of want some money back for that. And then there's a fee for conference room staffing over at KFRC. Since we don't have anyone there all the time, and there is an interest to hold activities there, we felt that putting a fee in here for opening the building, for cleaning it up, ensuring that people are out, and then closing the building back up during those activities would be something you'd be interested in. And then we removed the effective dates for the tobacco since that has passed. The staggered dates aren't applicable anymore. And that was it. Any questions? Oh, I do know there was discussion about an increase in the asbestos fees, but that you guys would have to discuss amongst yourselves. I don't have that on here.
Ryan, do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, talk about shooting my own foot, as I illustrated in the email to Amy. So our organization works in multiple states, and Kodiak has one of the lowest asbestos fee structures in our service areas. And just to declare, I have an environmental company, and so I would just propose that the level fee structure that has been in existence for as long as I can remember be increased. So,
Do you have a recommendation by how much?
I had originally put in an email, I believe 10 to 20%. I think that the number would need to be calculated based upon the amount of expenditure by the top cover that has to go over the asbestos. So I can't imagine that top cover has been the same price for the last several years. So if we're increasing our expenditures on top cover, I think that we should increase the expenditures on the asbestos. Thanks.
Amy? Through Dave?
Actually, our cover material has been fairly consistent because of the ability, we have been allowed the ability to develop our own cover at the site rather than import cover. However, I'd be happy to double the cost for asbestos disposal for the simple reason I think we're going to see a very large increase in what's happening. As the city is looking at replacing transite pipe, as construction goes on the Coast Guard facility, the reason, I'm not trying to be greedy, what I'm trying to do is practical, because as our asbestos cells fill up, we are then required to build additional new asbestos cells. So we're kind of inflation proofing what we're doing, and I was being facetious when I said double or triple the fee. But I think a modest increase, perhaps once, 1 year. So it's 200 per cubic yard. And if we would go to, just increase it by 20% this year, look at what that does and how much asbestos we're coming. Let's do modest increase instead of doing the, oh my God, I got to pay what, increase.
Ryan? And then Scott?
Yeah, so that's where my number was derivative from, is because I know firsthand the upcoming volume that is going to be produced over the next 5 to 7 months here in Kodiak, and it's substantial. So my original thought to this was to break the fee structure out even further, have a Category 1 or Category 2, regulated asbestos-contained material versus non-regulated asbestos-contained material. But in order to surmise what that is when it arrives at the landfill, you actually have to be a certified asbestos inspector, so that's not plausible. So a universal increase across the board would prevent us from having to do additional HERA-based inspector training or recognition. So that's where the thought process came in.
Larry?
Scott was next.
Oh, Scott, excuse me.
Mr. Sherritt had said that this was low compared to other places that he's seen. Maybe get an average of what other places are doing. I mean, I think that asbestos is a pain for everybody to deal with, and paying for it is just not that big a deal. You got to do it, so.
Go ahead, Ryan, on that.
Well, I assure you it's a big deal. However, we get to pass that cost on to the contract holder. Typically, in every other landfill facility, asbestos is priced by the ton. It is not priced by volume of what we do here. And it ranges anywhere between $75 to $80 on a quarter ton. So you're looking at
$320.
You're looking at 300 to 325 in a cubic yard.
Dave?
But it also depends on the type of asbestos being generated. CAB, cement asbestos pipe, is going to be a larger volume and sometimes a larger weight than TSI, thermal systems insulation. However, TSI can technically weigh more because of the requirement to be adequately wet. So I don't really want to teach my guys at the landfill this. They're really smart guys, they're really good guys, but I think
Right now, we're doing it by the yard.
flat-free is a much better way to go.
Yeah, and that's the caveat is there are also 5 different types of asbestos that fall into that. So you could have a category 1, a category 2, 3, or 4, depending on what it is, and then an unclassified. So those are typically your 5 categories for disposal, and each one has an incremental value. But to Dave's point is all of those acceptance facilities, or TSDFs, they are all licensed as asbestos inspectors and can conduct a visual observation to classify the material.
I was just thinking that a 20% increase after no increase for years and years and years seems small. And I wanted to see a bigger increase.
Well, I was thinking 50%. I don't know how long it's been, and I prefer the cubic yard because of the volume. We're dealing with volume. It takes up space on there. Ryan?
So let me just calm you down a little bit. I don't think that 50% increase is in order. However, the volume, so let's just talk about kind of the cement asbestos board and cement transite pipe that Dave's talking about. So the EPA released alternative methods for removing cement asbestos pipe, and they called it not asbestos abatement if you can remove a cement asbestos pipe intact. Well, when you remove a cement asbestos pipe intact, it has a tremendous amount of volume versus crushed up. The EPA has also said that if that pipe is crushed up, it is a regulated asbestos-containing material or a friable asbestos. So if you were to change volume to ton, the landfill would be inundated with regulated asbestos-containing material, which would trigger additional compliance audits, and I don't think that that would be a very good idea. So a level a level increase, I think is on board. And we'd need to do some legacy records to when that price was last increased. However, it has been a stable amount for quite a while.
Quite a while, been approximately how long?
I don't want to misquote.
I've been out basically involved in the landfill since 13 or 14, and it has never gone up,
So we're talking about 10 years here.
at least.
So we're talking about, 22%.
I was thinking 25% increase. I've come down off of 50 on there. 30. Okay. So if you can get us a little bit more historical information on it for next week on there, whatever might be available, when the last time it was raised. Dave?
So you're looking for the last time it was raised, not necessarily volume?
Correct.
Okay.
And, and what I'm hearing is there's potentially a lot coming in, and I know we're going to fill up the space we have, and we're going to have to then create another area, I'm assuming, where we're going to be disposing of asbestos.
We actually just increased the size of the asbestos cell and put up new fences, so we're good for a little while. But what I just heard was, I'm going to need to look for more space.
Yeah, that's what I hear too. So that's one thing, and then next thing was on the 260 pounds. Larry?
Dave, a couple of things. One is that periodically, when my wife makes me go to the dumpster, I peek inside just to see what's going on. And I'm sure I'm the only one in Kodiak that does that, but I see a lot of times hazardous waste dumped in there, paint cans, different things, sometimes oil containers. And I guess I have two questions. One is, I think people shouldn't do that, but I sometimes think they do it because they can't bring very much out to the landfill. Like, what is it, 30 pounds a month of hazardous waste? I'm not sure exactly what it is. Anyway. And the other is, and just from personal experience, you can dump your own construction waste into a dumpster from your house legally. Or you can take it to the landfill. If you put it in the dumpster, it fills it up and makes people really mad. Or you take it out there and you end up paying extra money. And I guess what I'm saying is as a citizen, and I think many others, would appreciate if it was raised to 500 pounds for your own waste materials going out to the landfill instead of 250. Because what people do, and to avoid paying an extra fee, they just put it in the dumpster, which fills it up, and it doesn't fill it up very compactly, if you will. It takes up a lot of room, and sometimes you go out there and it's just full of shingles and whatever. So I'm sort of interested in changing it back to 500, even though I think I voted to make it 250 a long time ago.
Bad boy. Yeah, you did. Been trying to get it up.
So the
You want to answer to that right now, or?
Well, it's just the hazardous waste material. I'm just wondering if we increased, since it messes up the leachate field and it does bad things, to our treatment system or the garbage or what, refuge, I think is what we call it now.
Municipal solid waste.
Okay. Thank you. That it's better for it to actually turn it into to get rid of the proper way instead of throwing it in there. Maybe I'm wrong.
So it's 40 pounds is what the limit is. And I would also caution the use of the words hazardous waste, because I believe it should be hazardous material rather than hazardous waste. There's a whole different classification. I do understand your point. However, my point when it comes to whatever is going in that dumpster hazardous is more the health and safety of my employees. And that's truly what the concern should be here. And if it's a matter of raising that, so be it. We can probably do that. The other thing is, I don't think that we do enough education. I don't believe that if people were to know that you can take certain types of latex paint and mix them with cheap cat litter and let them dry out, that it's no longer a waste product whatsoever. And if you let the can dry out, that is no longer a waste product. However, it's a recyclable metal. So there are alternatives, and that is, I think, something that the SWAB board should be tasked with, and maybe doing some more education on how to render municipal solid wastes to a different state where it's more friendly to dispose of in our landfill environment. I am not for raising this to 500 pounds. I'm not for putting it back, for the simple reason that this is an enterprise fund. We have a very expensive scale that's going to need to replace in the next couple of years. We have 2 dump trucks that need to be replaced. We have a baler that is going to need replacement if we're going to continue to bale garbage. These are all high dollar items that are going to require replacement.
And we just increased our loan amount to $6 million. So I'm going to keep throwing that out there. Like, we're still having to loan money to make the landfill work. So,
Borrow money.
yeah, I wish it was a loan. You're right, borrow. Thank you.
So, any further discussion? Ryan?
So I'll definitely echo Mr. Conrad's concern between a hazardous waste and a hazardous material. We personally at our office receive 3 to 5 phone calls a week on what to do with their household exempt hazardous waste. And I would encourage a borough-wide initiative for education. Quite frankly, it'll free up my time. And Dave is 100% correct. When you add kitty litter, you're doing a process called stabilization. The landfill has a requirement under the EPA regulations for Subtitle D and Subtitle C landfills. We have a D landfill, and we can take certain stabilized materials here, AKA kitty litter paint. And so I would just really encourage community initiative for education on this. And that's, in my opinion, the only way that we're going to get away from hazardous materials, including car batteries inside of dumpsters.
Any further discussion? With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next, which is ordinance number FY 2023-2C, an ordinance of the Assembly of the Kodiak Island Borough amending ordinance number FY 2023-2 fiscal year 2023 budget by amending budgets to account for various revenues that are over budget, providing for additional expenditures, and moving funds between projects. Amy?
This will be Dora again.
Okay.
Evening. This is the third time you've seen this ordinance. It is a cleanup ordinance for the end of the last one for fiscal year '23. There are several items on here. The first one was originally matching the contract payment from the general fund that's been changed to the renewal and replacement fund for $240,000 for the roof repair to the high school. The next one is a $15,000 transfer from buildings and grounds to the pool evaluation project. There's a request for transfer $10,000 from building and grounds to the East Elementary emergency ceiling and wall fixture in the gym project. There's a request to transfer $30,000 from building and grounds to the North Star roof and skylight repair project. There's a transfer request of $100,000 from fire protection area number 1 to the Bayside classroom addition project. There's a return of $251,362 of unexpended capital project wall funds to the hospital, back to the hospital fund. Any questions?
Any questions? None at this time, other than I have a question. We have issue of some of the junk vehicles. There was some discussion on, we've got a motor home and that, and the state is not removing them off of the state right away. It's blocking private property. It's paying property taxes to the borough. We're probably going to end up doing some things, and we're expending. There was money put in the capital account along with a little bit in the operating, but I would contend that we move $25,000 from the motor vehicle collection tax to add it back in to rebuild the capital account to make sure we have enough money to remove vehicles, because the state's doing a piss poor job on theirs, and in the past the boroughs ended up paying for that. So, and that's part of what that motor vehicle tax is for. So I throw that out for discussion, because this is the time to do it before the end of the fiscal year. Any comments, Dora?
So you're looking to short the fund we're planning debt bond reimbursement payments from by $25,000.
Partially, and I'm not looking to short it. It's one of the allowable expenditures within there. And in the current year's budget, we underestimated the revenue side of it. We are receiving more money than we budgeted to receive. So it would come out of the excess funds that are being received over the budget amount.
So those excess funds were also budgeted as a decrease in next year's debt service collections.
All of them?
At the time we calculated the difference, yes. There's, I think, if you look at that, it's $265,000 that we defrayed the debt service collection for the tax levy by those excess funds in that account, because we can only hold a certain amount in that account before it violates the bona fide debt service accounts, and I'm subject to arbitrage rules on that account.
Okay. Now, what about, and I understand that part, you and I have discussed the arbitrage rules before, but one of the things on this motor vehicle tax, we're not going to know until after the end, right,
Yeah.
what we receive. And do we have an opportunity to maybe amend?
You can always do a budget amendment next year for any excess and take it out of fund balance.
That's what I'm looking for. We'll see what we actually receive and then make that determination. But I'd like to add to that capital account that we have. So I don't have a problem with waiting till we see exactly what we receive by the end of August. Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is under contracts, contract number 2023-28, change order number 1, authorization to purchase an available chassis for a Bayside fire response vehicle. Amy?
I'm sorry, but do you want the borough manager's report in there first, Mr. Mayor?
That wasn't on mine.
Oh, I'm looking at the next week's,
Right.
right? Yes, we do have a report for the chassis. I was just
Thank you,
thinking,
Amy.
hey, yes.
So this is basically a request by Bayside, and this has been approved by their board, to increase the amount by $14,000 from $247,264 to $261,264. There's a frustration in the fact that this particular vendor went into contract, we entered into contract with this particular vendor who had ordered X amount of chassis from Chrysler Corporation and is still waiting for VIN numbers. So consequently, until VIN numbers are issued by the car manufacturer, you do not have a chassis. There was another manufacturer of fire trucks that bought an XS for a contract and had 3 XS. I just happened to have a conversation with Lee Finlayson and gave this guy a call on the right day because he had 3 chassis. So this $14,000 reflects the difference from a 22 chassis to a 23 chassis. Bayside is willing to do this. They're going to have a white cab on their fire truck. They can put skins on it if they choose to. So their stipulations were that they will enter into this agreement if it can be delivered by August 31st of this year. And the other is that they get a vehicle that is comparable or better than. I believe the keyless entry is one of the only things that they will not get on this particular vehicle. It's a fire truck. They are recommending this. I am recommending that you authorize us to enter into this alternative contract or a contract amendment with this particular vendor.
Thank you. Any questions? Larry?
What is a chassis? I mean, you're using that term in a different way than I.
That's the cab of the truck and the frame rails. So that's what's delivered, and from there, the manufacturer builds the mini pumper that they have ordered.
Let's see.
And it would also be almost a year if they waited for their original, they said 12 to 18 months, but they still don't have a timeline if they wait for their original order. And normally, they could make a change if it's 5% or under, but this just happens to be at 5.66, so you're going to see it come in front of the assembly to make the change that's just slightly over 5%.
Dave?
So Women's Bay Fire had the same exact thing happen to us, except in reverse. We were slated for a state contract Ford vehicle, and we were offered a Dodge. The other thing this does is it now gives us 2 Dodge Cummins turbos that we can have a similar mechanic work on both these vehicles.
Ryan?
That was my question, is if there were like-type manufacturers or like-type vehicles in the fleet. You answered it. I appreciate it. And very good find, because supply chain issues are crazy right now, so good job.
Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll move on to contract number FY 2023-50, authorizing the manager to execute contract with Convergent for the Kodiak Island Borough Linnell System Service and Maintenance. Amy?
Sure, that's Dave again.
Basically, this is reauthorizing and issuing the contract to the contractor who changes his name frequently for the service of the swipe card locks in this facility, Bayside, and the KFRC, which has the majority of the swipe blocks that we service. I will say that in the years that I've been dealing with these swipe card locks, the service that we just received from this company was exceptional. And I hope it continues, because my guys learned more in 2 days with this gentleman than we probably have in the last 5 years.
Okay, and Dave, basically it says the contract it's a 5-year contract in the amount of $48,494, and that's total for the 5 years?
That is correct, unless there are specialties that come up.
Okay, replacement of something.
Well, this is our vendor, but if there is some weird system crash that we have to fly them down here specific, there would be an additional charge for that, the flight, the per diem, things of that nature.
And how do you feel this compares with what we've been paying?
Well, it's an increase of less than $10,000, and that price has not gone up for the last 5 years. So I think this is, considering the way costs have gone, I think this is a bargain.
I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
Is this run from a centralized SCADA system, or is this facility by facility?
It's kind of an awkward system because we're not wireless. So consequently, we keep all the data, do all the swipe cards, everything like that here. But then anytime a swipe card has to be changed or a card reprogrammed, the laptop has to be taken to the individual locks and done. I would love to go to a wireless system. However, I don't believe we have the funds to expend that at this point in time.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next, which is ordinance for introduction. This is ordinance number FY 2024-3, rezoning lot 26A, U.S. Survey 3098, from R1 Single Family Residential to B Business District. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you. Seema is here on vacation to do this. and
Thank you, Seema.
She's ready to go. Thanks, Seema.
I feel like I need to introduce myself because it's been the Dave and Dora show. So, hi, I'm Seema. First, I'd like to apologize to the Assembly for not providing you with a complete packet. I was on vacation when I put this together, and I did not put everything in the packet that I said I was going to. You've been given a handout of the applicant's list of reasons of why he believes that the P&Z Commission's decision should be reversed. That letter will be in your packet next week, as well as a supplemental staff report from me that will include more information than what I give you tonight. As pointed out in my staff report to the Commission in case 23015, this rezone request has been denied 3 times now. Once in 2017 by the Assembly following Commission approval, again in 2019 by the Commission, and now in 2023 by the Commission again. Staff believes that the report in your packet does stand on its own merit. On page 1 of the applicant's letter, in line 2, the applicant states, quote, "My attempts to use my property and bring it to normal compliance have repeatedly been unfairly denied. The fact that the property is currently out of zoning compliance, outdoor storage in an R1 zone, results directly from the action of the property owner, despite his request to rezone to business having been denied previously. Rezones are not intended to cure zoning violations on individual properties." In the section titled "Support for Rezone" in the 2008 Comprehensive Plan, while the passages quoted here are accurate, they are selectively misleading. The goal of the 2008 Comprehensive Plan to, quote, "regulate and manage land uses to balance the rights of private property owners with community values and objectives," does not apply only to private property seeking a rezone. It recognizes that there is a balance that must be achieved between rezone applicants and neighboring properties alike. In the section titled "Support for Rezone" in the 2020 Mill Bay Road Corridor Study, Again, the selectivity of the passages quoted does a disservice to the overall intent of the study. A balanced presentation would point out that the study emphasizes, quote, a near and long-term need to increase housing, end quote, as well as commercial services and recreational assets. The existing residential properties fronting on Bancroft Street are acknowledged to be a distinct, quote, a distinct residential neighborhood enclave, end quote, to be preserved in the interest of this mixed-use vision. So in the corridor, it calls out this Bancroft Street neighborhood. In the section titled Support for this rezone through recent precedent, each of the properties listed here as precedents have different circumstances and unique characteristics. It can be misleading to ignore that in suggesting that they are all relevant examples supporting this rezone request, when the most pertinent and compelling precedent for this rezone request is the one conveniently not included in the list, which is the rezone request for this property from R1 to business from 2017 and 2019, which have been denied. In the section titled Failure of the Kodiak Island Borough to Provide Professional Planning Services, whether or not community development is currently staffed by planners with professional planning experience, the comment to the effect that this casts doubts on whether applicants are able to get a fair chance at public process is nonsense. This statement assumes that the decision makers at two levels, the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Assembly, are incapable of independent thought in decision making, and implies that the department staff is who makes all of these decisions. Omitted from the letter was the definition of spot zoning quoted in the original staff report from the reference source, the latest illustrated book of development definitions, which reads, rezoning a lot or parcel to benefit an owner for use of that is incompatible with surrounding land and does not further the comprehensive zoning plan. So it's spot zoning any way that you look at it. Additionally, a rezone to business should include evaluation whether the property can satisfactorily meet not only the parking area development standards for non-residential uses of KIBC 17.175.080, addressing vehicular circulation, storage, parking areas, aisles, turning and maneuvering areas, driveways, point of ingress and egress, and separation of right-of-way intersections, but also general requirements of 1535.040, addressing drive access and grades. The additional information that was given to you today include the comp plan map showing that the property was to remain at the R1 zone, and pages from the Mill Bay Road Corridor Study. The supplemental staff report will include these items along with pages from the comp plan and a detailed summary response to the applicant's letter. Staff will be asking that the Assembly will postpone this ordinance at the regular meeting on June 15th, 2023. If the Assembly decides to move forward with this to public hearing, staff will be asking you to support the P&Z Commission's decision and deny the rezone. That was a lot, but it's late, and I cut that down from 4 pages.
Thank you for coming tonight to present that to us. Any questions of staff? Ryan?
Well, first, thank you for coming in on your vacation.
No worries.
I do want to make a statement to my colleagues here, is that should the borough choose to open more land, we probably wouldn't be having an argument about rezoning a residence to a business. The next thing is, can you explain to me what spot zoning is?
So spot zoning is when you take one piece and just change it to that zone because it benefits the individual and not the area. If you look at this piece of property, Mill Bay is here, But there is no access for this lot, even though it's on the corner, it can't access from Mill Bay. It comes all the way down, and Bancroft does this big
Cul-de-sac.
L kind of cul-de-sac. There's 11 residential properties, and Mill Bay, or that Bancroft isn't a not very nice road. It's not well-maintained, it's gravel, and so for that to be zoned, that traffic will impede on these residential people's stuff. And because the one next door is zoned business, he comes off of Mill Bay through somebody else's property. So that's where the turning and the intersection and all of that, if he chose to actually come in off of Mill Bay, because it's close to an intersection, he would have to have the ingress and the egress to come in and do all of that stuff. And that could be what he proposed. But the applicant actually came in and said that he wanted to do a single-family residence on there with an ADU, which is doable in this zone.
The residential zone.
In that residential zone that he is right now. So that's why it's spot zoning. If you look at the comp plan, it leaves, and I did give you a copy of that. This one was really hard for you guys to read, but he did an inset. But the comp plan for the future, for the 2008, leaves Bancroft as residential. And so does the Mill Bay Road Corridor Study. It leaves it as residential in there also, and it says that it literally, if you look at that on page 12 and 36, for that mixed-use corridor, on page 36, it calls out that residential enclaves in that corridor includes a single-family neighborhood along Bancroft Drive. And in their long-term future plan, it also leaves Bancroft as residential, including his lot.
Ryan, continue.
Follow-on question. So my limited experience is when somebody seeks a rezone, the borough sends out a questionnaire asking for objectors or supporters, even by proxy, I guess.
Yep.
Did the borough receive objections or support in either way for this?
Yes. So in your package, that part I did get in there. We actually had 2 anonymous people. They didn't want to be, in fear of the repercussion from the applicant, they didn't want their names or their addresses even printed. But we had 4 out of the 11 applicants or residents in that area come back and say that they were opposed to it. And those are in your packet,
Ryan?
4 of the 11, correct?
4 of the 11.
Does that mean that 7 did not respond?
7 did not respond.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions of staff? Thank you, Seema.
Thank you.
On there. Next item is other items. First one being confirmation of a mayoral appointment to the Park and Recreation Committee of Mr. James Arneson, who is our retired dentist in the community. He submitted his name, and I was moving it forward for confirmation by the assembly. Any discussion? Scott, thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Okay. Next item is authorization to cancel the June 29th, 2023 work session and the July 6th, 2023 regular meeting. I see thumbs up on James?
Why?
Close proximity to the 4th of July, and it was kind of a little bit of a summer break after the budget.
I'm here.
Ryan?
I have a scheduled date with Sunburn in the exact same time frame of this, so yeah, I would definitely support this.
Okay. Scott?
I'm okay.
Larry?
I'm here.
Okay. Well, I'm here too, but I think it's also a break for staff on the meeting schedule, and it's something that I think as a summer break on it works good. especially evidently in light of the 3 missing that we've had tonight. James?
I remember discussions when we were talking about the calendar, and I said that we should probably cancel those 2 meetings back when we discussed the calendar, and I was shot down, even though we take those 2 days off almost every single calendar year. I was shot down because we had to have them in there. And now we're going to vote to
Cancel.
not have them?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I tried to, but sometimes people finally got to see it in front of them to fully understand it. So you have a new mayor, and that's why I brought it forward.
Weren't you one that voted, though, not to do,
No?
just a comment.
Sure, Larry.
It might be good to find out from the full assembly where they're going to be this summer. It could be that a scheduled meeting will not have quorum because some people are traveling, and that might affect what we're doing too. I don't know if you've collected that travel information for the summer.
In the process.
Sorry.
I mean, we'll have
But
that.
I will.
If we have that by the next meeting, we can see if there's a problem coming up that we may have to not only cancel those 2, but others if we don't have quorum.
Well, what I've done here is it's come forward basically with the possibility of a special meeting if necessary. So I asked at the last agenda setting a week ago or so, asked Amy to look into this with staff and see what problems that might have been. So I would just
And
ask.
she did, and there is only one thing scheduled, and we just moved it to the next available
Perfect,
agenda slot.
perfect. So that was part of it. All righty. So that'll be coming forward to you next week. Next item is the mayoral appointment of assembly member representatives to the Health Facility Advisory Board, which is Mr. James Turner, and the Architectural and Engineering Review Board, which is Ryan Sherritt. So those will be coming forward. Next thing that would be on the agenda next Thursday is executive session. There's the Borough Clerk's performance evaluation and discussion of matters involving a current staff member's compensation. So that's what we've got. And next item is manager's comments. Amy, now you get to talk.
I knew it was in there. Thank you. Try to keep it short because I know the meeting is going long tonight. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that IBW met with their membership this past Monday to update them on the proposed agreement. They voted against the agreement with a vote of 21 noes to 3 yeses. So we're going to re-meet with IBW and their representative on Monday morning at 9 a.m. And then Dave and I are going to go to the airport, and we're going to go visit both Kodiak and Larson Bay, weather permitting, to go visit those schools and meet with the stakeholders out in those villages. I was also asked by someone who lives out in Larson Bay to support them through a grant process out there. And so I'm going to try to meet with them while we're out there as well. We're multitasking. The Bayside Fire Chief recruitment is complete. Chief Scott Ellis has been approved by the Fire Board and the Assembly. You guys voted last week. He plans on arriving in late July. So we've advised him to make his ferry reservations early, and he's looking very much forward. And it's Facebook official because I saw it on his Facebook page. Community Development Director, I authorized a job offer to go out today to a candidate for the position. He had a really good second interview this week. He said he would need to take some time before he got back to us because he needed to evaluate the housing situation here in Kodiak, which I think is very fair. Just a couple of quick things. I went out and saw the leachate treatment plant. The wall panels are all up, and the exterior doors and the roll-up door are supposed to be on site next week, and got the opportunity to meet some of the contractors out there. The big thing I want to draw your attention to in engineering facilities is with the hospital, because we are about to cancel the June 29th and July 6th meetings. Our next regular meeting would land on July 20th. They have a time-sensitive item from their Joint Commission review, and they've requested us to fund a pre-construction engineering bid with Cool Air Mechanical out of Anchorage. That's the last page of your manager report is the information on that. So we asked Nova if we could put that on the agenda for next week. So you'll see that on the agenda on the 15th, so we can take a look at that It will not exceed $25,000, and we just wanted to make sure that we pushed that through before we took a break. And we did have a new employee start this week in IT. Our new GIS analyst is here, so we're excited to have Travis aboard, and it's nice having people that are newer than me, which is wonderful. There are now 2 of them, and I think you'll see some changes in assessing and community development now that SEMA is back, so we'll be able to update that more for you.
Thank you. Any questions of Larry? And then Ryan.
Well, I was just referencing something Ryan was saying. If FEMA is coming to town, it might be good to talk about Kodiak and their water system at the same time.
Get out of my brain.
Well, sorry. I'm just listening to you. And
Excellent. We have a hazard mitigation grant that Dave and James Dixon worked on for the area out in Bells Flats with the rivers and how close Nick's Auto Salvage is to that salmon stream. And so we're going to tell them about that, but this does sound like an excellent opportunity to bring that up as well. Long day. So we'll include that in, and actually, I think Dave and I are both going to be traveling, but the main representative from FEMA is here all week, and so I'm going to try to meet with her again on Friday as well.
Ryan.
That was exactly what I circled. So, yeah, if we've got an opportunity to meet with FEMA, if they don't have the funds, they can endorse the application. It's almost a walk in the park at that point.
Okay, any other comments on the manager's report? Okay, next item is clerk's comments.
Thank you. I have given you a list of the notice of vacancies that we have, so if you know people that would like to apply in this boards, just send them my way. The application is available online as well. So it's easy to apply. If someone is interested, they can just go online and apply. Election update, we're working on preparing the declaration of candidacy packets. We should have those available by July 10th, and we will also update, and we updated the notice of vacancies and the listing of the open position online already. That's available. Please note that if you're considering on putting a proposition or a question on the ballot, the deadline is coming up. We have to introduce an ordinance by July 20 and adopt it by August 3rd if you're interested in doing something like that. Okay? I haven't heard of anything from the assembly, but I just thought I'd give those timelines to you if you're thinking of something to put
Thank
on
you.
the ballot. Records, we did some historical research for assessing at the request of a title company. I'm so glad that we kept all the historical codes. I was able to backtrack and look up the information that they're requesting. Assembly leave dates, please give me your leave dates. Even if you're just gone for a day, I would appreciate knowing if you're going to be gone. Thank you. I have put down assembly travel here. We have the mayor and assembly member Jared Griffin scheduled for the AML conference in Homer. And then the mayor will also traveling to a NACO conference. Other projects, I'm doing some research on mayoral vacancy and possibly making some code changes or proposing some code changes in the future. I have done research for the mayor about absences, and also I updated the orientation manual, and I had my first the revised orientation manual. I was able to get together with our newly appointed assembly member, and we conducted an orientation on Tuesdays. So it was a good time to sit down with the newly appointed and elected in the future. So the Community Development Department asked for assistance to staff the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on June 21. So we're ready for that. We're processing a liquor license renewal for Safeway. And I have attached information about House Bill 133, so you might want to do some reading on it. I will be keeping you up to date on where it's at. Currently, it was introduced on March 27. It is currently pending in the House Community and Regional Affairs Committee. It's going to impact our service area board, so I'm going to be on top of it and keep you in the loop. So I look forward to having my evaluation with you next week. Borough offices will be closed on June 19, and last joint work session we held with the city was on January 18, so I'm not sure if there's an interest to schedule one in the future. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for the clerk? Seeing none, move on to assembly member comments. James, we'll start with you tonight. You're all by yourself over there. Everybody else skipped out between you and me.
Well, next time we do a calendar, I'm going to mark those dates so that we can take them off the calendar. Other than that, there are a couple members of Board of Fish coming into town this weekend. They're supposed to arrive tomorrow and fly the island to see how our fishing goes for this first opener. Hopefully they can get a better reference of what they're discussing in next Board of Fish meeting that's coming up.
Thank you. Ryan, that letter will come up under mayor comments.
Well, this is my first meeting, and nobody threw me out, so this is an experience. As you guys know, I did not have governmental experience, and I would just communicate to those interested in running and to filling these vacancies that I guess it's just not quite as scary as you think it is. So thank you for putting up with me tonight. Thank you.
You. Scott?
No comments tonight.
Larry?
Just a couple of things. Now that we're finished with our budget, and we've set aside a number of issues that, we want to take a look at. And, we have these forms here that I'll be filling out. But one of the areas that we were going to talk about is, and I think Seema has indicated this might be a good thing, is to review the language on ADUs to clarify some of the areas. And I'd like us to schedule some time to do that. Also, I think we've committed to take a look at the senior exemptions early so that, and to discuss that as a group. I've been an advocate for releasing borough lands and having a resource officer. And I have to say, it's not just a matter of identifying lands and putting them up for sale. It's really taking a look at land development, which ultimately leads to, cost-effective land for people to build homes or apartments, to take care of one of the biggest economic development blocks in Kodiak, and that's to make affordable land and, again, affordable housing available for young people to build homes like many of us did. And I really think we need to sit down and talk to developers and really take a look at it. Our mayor has indicated that there's been some dialogue, and I don't want to do it in a way that puts more pressure on people that are already overworked and have a lot to do and, take pride in doing a really great job in what they do. And I really think we need to move on that. I also believe, try to say this carefully, the state has underfunded education for many years, and the borough has stepped to the plate. People have done a lot of things, they've written grants, and a lot of the economic challenges that many districts are going through around the state, and they are severe, Kodiak hasn't experienced. And now that the state is coming back to fill the gap in a big way, it's very, very important that we sit down with the school board when we're not right in the middle of a budget and really discuss, our relationship with them. They're doing a lot of maintenance that they never did before. They've spent millions in the last 6 or 7 years, to help out the borough. But on the other hand, they're having big fund balances. And, those are important to them, but I really believe as the state starts coming in with extra funds, it gives the borough a chance to stabilize funding, so we're not under the sort of Damocles every time there's a budget that you have to fund or great things will happen. So I really believe there's a lot of positive dialogue that can happen that will be good for the district and good for the borough and provide stability. So I think that's important. And finally, I think sometime, as we need to review the mayor's authority. We used to have a powerful mayor, manager, if you will, and then we moved to a weak mayor, and then they made him even weaker. So that a recommendation letter, just a simple recommendation letter, has to be approved by the assembly. That is silly. And, the public elects the mayor, and if they write a bad recommendation letter, they can be replaced at the next election, I suppose. But we need to really talk about that. We're wasting a lot of time needlessly. And that's just Mickey Mouse stuff. But if we can just talk about it, we can move forward on these and make progress and feel like we're really doing some things. And I know there's other issues there, but I think the purpose of these, if I get 3 assembly members to sign these things, then it will go on the agenda. And I probably don't need to do it. Scott's very amenable, and I'd rather not try to fill one out. But those are the areas that I really think we need to roll up our sleeves and really talk about while we have the time. And we're not under the budget, or we're not in some timeline that forces us not to do a thorough discussion of these items. So anyway, I wanted to say those things because that's where my focus is on those.
Thank you, Larry. Next is mayor's comments, which brings me to a letter of recommendation. I received a request on Tuesday, late afternoon, from Major Dave Davis, requesting a letter of recommendation. And he said he needed it by Thursday. I said I needed to at least talk to the assembly to get some direction. I could possibly have it if they concurred that I could do this on Friday, and he said that would work. So you have a copy of that letter of recommendation for Major Dave Davies, and I would kind of request consensus for me to move forward with that. I see 2 thumbs up over here. Larry?
I don't think you can do that. That's the ridiculousness of it. I certainly think it's a great letter and I support it, but there is no process of consensus to approve it because the
Okay,
ordinance says
do
you
you want to
can't.
remove me if I do this, sign this tomorrow?
No.
I think there's provision for the mayor to write and sign a letter if it's in the general feeling is that the assembly would have approved it if had the right time to do it, correct? So.
Sounds good to me.
James?
So, I don't mind the letter, but I do agree with Dr. Ledoux about this, is that it should not be brought forward during a work session. But you're kind of getting your answer anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. I will sign this, and there was some expedience that was requested. I didn't get into the exact details with him, just trusted that he needed it on there. So I will sign this, and he'll have this tomorrow. So thank you for your support, and we'll go from there.
You didn't get our support.
Okay, thank you for your acknowledgement of the letter. How's that?
See no evil, hear no evil.
Smooth, you said?
Smooth.
Thank you.
We'll remind him of this later on some other issue.
Definitely.
So with nothing else, I'd like to adjourn this work session at 9:48.
Oh, come on.
Let's see. Nope, 9:48.
This old guy has to go after there now and then.
Are you talking about you or me?
Me. You want me to carry that out for you?
That box?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my. Thank you, guys. There's something going on, and I don't know exactly what it is.
With him?
Yeah.
Well, I don't care about it, but technically,
Yeah. Well,
that's why it's so silly.